Hey guys, so today we are learning about finding out angles instead of values. So if we were finding values, we'd be using something like this where we use our special triangles and figure out what sine of pi over 3 is actually equal to. But now we got to figure out instead a different piece of information. So now if I say sine of x, and from now on, we'll be talking about sine in terms of x for angles instead of theta. So sine of x will equal, let's say for this example, sine of x is equal to 1/2 and a positive 1/2. Okay, so what we're looking for is we're looking for the two spots on the unit circle where x is equal to this 1/2. So my first step would be to kind of figure out, well, where is this sine of x going to equal a positive, right? So where is sine positive? So I'll label out my cast rule, and I'll say that sine is positive in the all quadrant and the sine quadrant. So that's really important. So that would be step 1, or I guess I'm going to label. All right, so step 2 would be for me to look at my unit circle. So these are still very valuable for us, except we're using them in a slightly different way. So this one here I'll label, this is my root 3, 2, and 1, where I have my pi over 6 up top. Remember, 3 times 2 will give me that 6 up top angle if you need something to remember that by. And on the bottom I have pi over 3. It's not that great to see, but you can see that this pi over 3, 2 and 1 add together to get 3. So that's how you can remember that as well. So right now I'm looking at this, and this is sine. So sine means the opposite, right? So in the SOHCAHTOA, so it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. So I'm looking at this and saying that, well, the opposite of pi over 6 is 1, and the hypotenuse here is 2. So we must be dealing with, and we're going to call this now a reference angle, right? So an angle that we're going to be referring to and using in the future. So here our reference angle is going to be pi over 6. Now, one thing for step 3 that we have to recognize is that we can have multiple pi over 6s all around the unit circle, and this step will hold true for just about all of these types of questions. So here, just in this top right quadrant, if I land in this quadrant, it will just equal my reference angle. Okay, so here for A, because this is just in the quadrant that only has the reference, I know that one of my answers will be pi over 6, but I'll actually show you that and kind of get to that in a minute. Here, this one's going to be pi minus a ref, right? So again, if you remember how this is labeled, that's 0, this is pi over 2, this is pi, this is 3 pi over 2, and this is 2 pi. So right now I'm looking at pi, and I'm going to be scaling it back minus some bit into my reference into this little bit right here. If you were to kind of be playing along and see that this is pi minus ref, you might guess that this would be pi plus the reference. So you're going pi, and then you're adding a little bit onto here, and then finally this will be your 2 pi minus your reference down here. Okay, so this is where part 3 and part 1 connect. So I notice that I have an A and an S because I have my sine as positive, right? So it's positive in the all quadrant and the sine quadrant. So I'll come over here and I'll say that this is going to be my reference and my pi minus reference quadrant. So here I'm going to have two answers, where part 1, or my first answer, is going to be just the reference angle, right? So this is just going to be x is equal to pi over 6. And then my answer number 2, or my second option here, is the pi minus reference. So here I'll say that x is equal to pi minus my pi over 6. Now remember, I can represent this pi in any way, shape, or form as long as I do it correctly and multiply the top and the bottom. So here I'm going to say that this is x equals 6 pi over 6. Remember, just multiplying the top and the bottom by the denominator of the second number for fractions, minus pi over 6 here, and I will say that this 6 minus pi is just going to be 5 pi over 6. So what this is really saying is that, well, if I'm looking at my unit circle, and you won't have to label this out at the end, but this is just for your concept development here. So if I have something that's going to be out here of pi over 6, I know that it's going to be I don't know exactly what kind of cos it is. I could figure that out, but that's cos of x. And I know from what I was given at the beginning that this is positive 1/2. So this is positive 1/2 here. And I also know that my 5 pi over 6, so this angle right here, where I'm labeling that out, this is going to be 5 pi over 6 as my angle. And I know I'll have some cos x value, but I'll also have another positive 1/2 here. Okay? So let's try another one really quickly here. Let's do the cos of x is equal to plus root 3 over 2. So step one would be to figure out, well, if we look up top, step one would be figure out where is cos positive, right? So I'm taking a look at my unit circle and C, A, S, and T, and I know that my cos is going to be positive in the all and in the cos quadrant. So step two, I'm looking at the triangle here where it has root 3 over 2. So I'm going to say root 3, I have 2 and 1, and you don't need to draw out the special triangles for each time. What I usually do is draw it at the top of the page and just kind of see it each time, but this is just for your benefit right now. So you can see this as pi over 6. This one's going to be pi over 3 down at the bottom. All right, now remember that cos is CAH, so it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And unfortunately enough, I chose an example that is the exact same reference angle as before. So the reference angle here is going to be, because this is the adjacent, this is the hypotenuse, I'm going to say that this is the pi over 6 angle in here. So step 3, I'm going to take a look at my kind of reference drawing here. So I have ref, pi minus my reference, pi plus my reference, and 2 pi minus my reference. So I'll get slightly different answers here than up above, and that's all right. So here I'm looking at my reference and my 2 pi minus reference because the A and the C quadrants are what I'm interested in. So part I, so first answer here for reference, or I guess part 1 as I labeled up above. So 1, my first answer could be just x is equal to pi over 6. Now, if I'm looking at my second answer, which would be my 2 pi minus ref, I'd have to say x is equal to 2 pi minus pi over 6. Multiply the top and bottom by 6, so that way I can actually subtract that fraction, so that's going to equal 12 pi over 6, right? 2 times 6 is 12, and then I'm going to subtract a pi over 6 out of that. And finally, I'll know that x is equal to 11 pi over 6. So here, where cos of x is equal to positive root 3 over 2, right, I know that the angles that will give me that value are going to be pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. There's going to be another video that follows this up, so if this was easy, go ahead and take a look at it. It's called using... shoot, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the next video. It'll be on your handout from class, and then there's another one after that where we solve on different intervals. So have fun with those. If this was challenging, watch it again. Take a look at your textbook. There's some examples in there for you.